Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of the Resilience Rundown, the OSHO. I'm your host, Thomas Bryant, and I have the pleasure today to be joined by Taylor Grossman from the Institute of Security and Technology. Taylor, welcome to the show. I'd love to start off. If you could tell us maybe a little bit about yourself and the IST.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Thomas. Great to be here. So I am the Deputy Director for Digital Security at the Institute for Security and Technology, and we are a small nonprofit think tank. We're bi-coastal, so our home base is in the Bay Area, but we also have a critical mass of folks in DC. And we work on issues of, around security and technology, and particularly providing actionable solution sets. So we're very action-oriented, engaging with government, the think tank community, private sector actors, and serve as a trusted convener and research organization.
Awesome. So one of the things that I think is really interesting is you all have a ransomware task force. Could you maybe explain who's in that and what was the impetus to kind of start that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Ransomware Task Force was started in the fall of 2020. And it very much came out of the growth of ransomware that we saw, particularly over the first year of the pandemic. There were a lot more incidents that were coming out of targeting hospitals, educational institutions, really capitalizing right on the work from home switch that a lot of folks underwent. And there was a growing feeling that ransomware wasn't just a cybercrime issue anymore. It was really a national security threat. And so IST, along with several other organizations, convened a task force to look at the problem again from that lens of it really being a much broader issue than just something that we can think of in the crime area. And that group of folks was over 60 experts from industry, international organizations, cyber insurers, governments, nonprofits, academic institutions, you name it. We tried to bring in folks from everywhere. And, the idea was to really come up with a comprehensive framework for understanding the issue and for tackling the issue.
Oh, okay. So, speaking of the framework, you all have a combating ransomware framework. Could you maybe expand on what that is?
Yes. So in April of 2021, we published the findings from the first iteration of the Ransomware Task Force. And we had 48 recommendations that we split into 4 different categories. Again, we really wanted it to be a comprehensive unpacking and, sort of solution set for this issue, kind of from all angles. So the 4 buckets of recommendations were under deterring ransomware threats, disrupting ransomware activities and incidents, preparing for ransomware for organizations and governments, and then also responding effectively to ransomware incidents. And we had if you look at our report, it's quite lengthy. It outlines kind of our core findings around, coordinating law enforcement and diplomatic efforts to really think about this as a global issue, launching a robust anti-ransomware campaign at the U.S. government level, thinking about how to respond really with both funding, but also, bringing organizations to a place where they could really think more, sort of more holistically about whether or not to pay, encouraging organizations to, report payments and also really even report them before they make payments. And then also regulating the cryptocurrency ecosystem that enables ransomware crime. But I really encourage folks who are interested to look at all 48 recommendations, or at least, take a dive on a plane, or, do a nice skim, because we really thought carefully about how they all fit together. We didn't want to just provide sort of, Band-Aid solutions, but really how do we turn this system around and really, really get rid of the threat.
Yeah, well, it's been 3 years since you've released it. Are you seeing companies and organizations adopt this, and are they finding success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there has been a lot of progress made. our most recent reports, we published progress reports every year since 2021. To sort of highlight areas, areas where we've seen improvement, and also areas where we'd like to see more efforts and resources dedicated. This past year, I think we're really at an interesting tipping point where we have, the U.S. government and like-minded governments, and also, a lot of private sector actors have really, stepped up in a lot of different areas. One, particularly on the government side, has been really thinking about incident reporting much more critically, and also working towards harmonizing incident reporting mechanisms. CERCIA, the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act that came out in 2022. We now have a notice of public rulemaking, and there will be steps taken to make reporting mandatory for critical infrastructure organizations, and also to make a reporting of any ransom payments mandatory, which will be really helpful on the information side of things. And there's a new initiative as well for DHS to work with DG Connect, which is the EU's organization that's working on this. So I think there's a real recognition that, we need to streamline this. We need to get good information so we understand the threat, and we also need to make it easier for organizations to come to governments with issues, report what they need to report, and get the help that they need. We've also, again, we're seeing a lot more international collaboration. The CRI, I think, is a great example of this. The Combating Ransomware Initiative now it started 3 years ago, and it now has 60 plus countries that are involved. And it really is, ransomware really is a big tent issue that folks, from around the globe are interested in getting involved in. And, it's one that affects all of us, not just the US, UK, France, but also Nigeria, Kenya, Brazil, India. Everyone is being hit.
So, you're seeing a lot of success. Are there any areas that we need to kind of double down in that we're either maybe not having as much success in, or like areas just that have cropped up that are newer that we haven't maybe focused on?
Yes, there's plenty more to be done. And I think just a quick perusal of the headlines shows that this threat is not going away yet. It's certainly something, we just there was a massive attack in the UK last week that hit a number of hospitals. The healthcare sector in particular, I think, is one that really comes home, because ransomware there can lead directly to loss of life and real harms, immediate harms. Yeah. I think one of the areas that we focus on in our most recent report is thinking more about strategic disruption. We've seen some great takedowns. I think the Lockbit takedown that happened earlier this year, a really good example of collaboration between lots of like-minded countries. The UK National Crime Agency took the lead, but the US was very involved, as well as a number of other countries. But we really need to be seeing disruptions happen all the time. And we also need to think about, again, not just sort of tactically getting rid of these groups, because they will, often quickly reform, but how to actually create enough friction in the system so that we're reducing profits. We're making it a lot harder for these actors to just spring up and start fresh again.
Yeah. Well, kind of to that end, like you mentioned, cryptocurrency and things like that. I would imagine being able to disrupt that then becomes a big part of that, right? It's not just people, it's also the technology and some of these platforms that enable cyber criminals to do what they do.
Yes, and that's a huge focus of our efforts. We have a payment ecosystem workstream at IST, where we convene working groups and think really a lot about the payment ecosystem, because there are a lot of different entities that are involved, from the time a ransom demand is made to the time that the ransomware actor is able to actually like wash and launder and then use that money to fund the infrastructure necessary to launch a new ransomware campaign. So we have really, worked very hard to identify some of those key points where we either have some visibility, we need more visibility, maybe under resourced or under regulated entities that need that we need to be focusing on. There's certainly, there are a lot of activities happening in safe haven countries that we can't necessarily touch, but the system from going from a crypto payment to one that is actually usable for the infrastructure side for ransomware actors, that's a long process, and there are lots of pieces and places for disruption efforts that we're trying to identify.
That's fascinating. I mean, I could talk to you for hours probably just on that alone, or any of these. But so who needs to take the lead to keep moving this forward as we keep pushing, right? You kind of mentioned that there's government, there's vendors, there's organizations that are under siege. Who, does everyone have obviously everybody has a part to play, but like, are there people that need to step up and drive more of this?
I think that, again, there's a lot of work to be done everywhere, for sure. Yeah. And that's one of the things that makes this such a thorny issue, and one where, again, our 48 recommendations, it's hard to pull out like just the one that'll get it. There is no silver bullet. I think, we certainly have identified a number of places where governments can and need to invest more. And I think the reporting frameworks that we mentioned, there needs to be more harmonization. And that's something that governments need to take the lead on instituting those policies. In the US context, a lot of this comes down to congressional action as well. So, fingers crossed that, I think CERCIA was a really great step in the right direction, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. I also think that we have thought a lot about awareness and building resilience for on the level of companies and critical infrastructure providers. So I think the U.S. National Security cybersecurity strategy, that highlighted secure by design. That's a really important piece, and that's something that the private sector is going to need to invest in early on, to really think about security. So we're not just dealing with kind of whack-a-mole incident response, but actually have a better ecosystem to begin with. And when you look at the critical infrastructure landscape, there are some sectors that have just invested a lot more in this, The financial sector is one that has had a handle on this for, I think, a lot longer. But there needs to be more, awareness and I think more straightforward guidance on how, smaller, farms and, water facilities, sectors that traditionally don't think of themselves as being ICT enabled, but are at this point. How to bring them up to speed and how to help them. And that's going to be really partnerships across the private and public sector.
Yeah, I mean, it's a change in mindset in many ways. And I mean, like you mentioned, like resilience, right? I mean, it's not, I think the key for me is that it's not like a one and done thing. It has to become part of just your modus operandi. You have to make this into something that you do and you think about all the time.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of organizations, they're newer to the cyber piece, but very few of us, if any, don't have some kind of ICT in our lives, which makes us more efficient in a lot of ways, but also more vulnerable.
Yeah. So, I mean, before we wrap up, if folks want to learn more about what we've been talking today and the Institute for Security and Technology, or engage with yourself, what would you recommend to folks? Like, how can they engage and learn more?
I would definitely encourage you to, go to our website, securityandtechnology.org. We've got a lot of great research on this topic. And we also hold webinars and roundtables, many of which are open to the public to jump in. We have an extensive network of adjuncts that are, lovely and engage with us frequently. I think the core recommendations that we provided in the progress reports will give you a great sense of kind of the shift in the threat landscape, the major activity that countries and companies have taken. So that's definitely one area I'd encourage folks to look into. I am on X, Twitter. We're not sure what to call it these days. At @tgrossman_. I'm always happy to chat more about ransomware and the Ransomware Task Force, and a lot of other work we're doing. And we've got, we have a lot more coming down in the next couple of months. So it's, this is an issue that will be with us, unfortunately, for some time to come. So we're stepping up our work.
Well, that's great. No, I look forward to reading more about it. It's certainly an interesting space, and yeah, like you said, it's not going anywhere. It's just kind of, there's more and more attacks. You can't go anywhere without seeing it. So, Taylor, thank you again for joining us today on the Resilience Rundown and sharing all your insights.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.